Hey guys, Master Xeon here with another tutorial time-lapse narrated for your pleasure by your favorite Blendertainment presenter, Master Xeon. So in this time-lapse, we are going to be going through the process of creating this model from a concept. So part one is Hello Bmesh. Bmesh, whenever it first came into Blender, it was something that really puzzled me. It took me a long time to get used to it, but now I'm completely used to it, and now I'm about to show you all my adventures in it. So the drawing, I sketched up a couple of pictures in Photoshop. First they're coming out kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog, but the basic idea was to create a stylized cyborg hero character using the Blender logo as his main silhouette for the head shape. So I do plan on making this a multi-part series. I know that there's a couple of multi-part series that are still left unfinished. Just know that I plan on coming back and finish them all. I've just been on a bit of a rampage lately. So let's go ahead and jump into Blender. So this video is going to be sped up by about 3 times. So that way we can cram an hour down. So of course I go in and throw in my concept as well as set up my screencasting for the keys. Drop in my reference image, split the window in half so I can make two. Now I'm just going to drop in a cube, and of course put an empty, and then change the empty to show images so I can have this in the view. The reason I use the empties instead of reference images is mainly because, it does give me GSR controls where I can just move, rotate, and scale the hell out of it and not have to worry about dealing with the end panel, which I like to hide as often as possible. So we start off dropping in a cube, subdividing it, and now I'm just beginning to just get the rough proportions of the head. So whenever it comes to a head, the main idea that I've come to in my head is, it's all in the planes. There's the cheeks, the brow, the mouth, the nose, all these areas are surrounded by specific planes, just like, how the role of the zygomatic and how it indicates the form of the head, and how without it your model will look fake and you might take a while to figure out why. But I'm going to actually try to do this without having to explain anatomy, because I'm not only am I not good at it, it's kind of a pain in the neck. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get a better understanding of it to assist my sculpting skills. But whenever it comes to anatomy, online mainly what I've read is that if you learn the planes of the head, then you can forget about the anatomy, because you'll at least know what it takes to make a form look right on a planar perspective. But anatomy is also good to have in there as well, so that way I have that knowledge whenever it comes to the rigging and deformation aspects of the character. So with Bmesh, as you can see, I'm able to just cut in and just work on areas without worrying about adding subcuts spanning the whole model, thus allowing me to be able to just deal with only the areas I want to deal with. Um, Whenever I explain it to my friends, I refer to it like hold the phone, because I just cut things up, don't have to deal with it until I feel like it. It's like hold the phone, I'll be right back. But, you know, I got the indication of the mouth here, but by dissolving it, I'm able to keep the form a lot more simple and just focus on the plane. So I replaced one of my reference images with a planar head, and this head is just one that I found off of Google, and it's pretty handy. I refer to it quite a bit, even more so than human faces now, because the first goal in making a model should be to obtain the planes, and with those planes you can modify them to get different races, creeds, sex, male and female, by just knowing the subtle differences in planar differences as far as men and women go, and anime stylized. And so that's, one day I hope to someday put out a master thesis Blender video that just is my way of explaining escorche or um, facial anatomy for a more methodical understanding of modeling, because I've watched tons of videos modeling. I spend all my free time watching everybody's tutorials that they make. Um, like I said, like someday there will be Blender TV. Hopefully, I get to be there, John Maddening other people's techniques, showing how people excelled here and whatnot. But I'm just kind of rambling. So with the knife tool, I cut, but once you cut, reality hits, and you start seeing that these planes aren't looking very nice. But you know, if we subcut, dissolve, we can just deal with it and build it plane by plane. So Bmesh has a lot of power here. Um, I'm telling you, when it first came, I wasn't sure how to really respond to the fact that everything I deleted never deleted really, because before they even had the options to delete vertices and whatnot in Bmesh, it just dissolved everything. So it was kind of annoying. And before I saw how the techniques are used in 3ds Max and Maya and Modo as far as dealing with n-gons and just the the modeling psychology that comes along with it, I'm much more comfortable with Bmesh now. And I know, Bmesh is, like Blender 2.55 or 5.4 or something. That was when Bmesh really hit the scene. Um, but don't worry, in the next video we go over the dynamic topology enhancements, and then maybe the rigging enhancements, and then the cycles enhancements. But we're going to make a full model, and I'm actually practicing it at the same time as I'm making this one just to ensure that the techniques go over well, on recording, because I do a lot of recordings and I just find myself messing up. So hopefully, we get all the way through this and y'all get to see some cool techniques and realize that, Blender is becoming closer and closer to becoming a all-in-one powerhouse where you can do a full production without even leaving. I mean, it's always kind of had that, but it's getting even better. I mean, I used to leave this program to use ZBrush. Not to say that this program suddenly has become better than ZBrush, because that's not even a valid argument. ZBrush stands in a league of its own. No other program can compare to its sculpting abilities, but this program is a fairly nice attempt. And so hopefully I also get to come back doing a video about just some of the differences between Blender's dynamic topology and ZBrush's own dynameshing, which I'd gotten quite acquainted with. But enough talking about programs, focus on the model here. So right here I tried a different way of making it, where I just try to build the chest, outer wire perimeter, and then just fill in the spaces, but nothing fancy here. Just filling in these faces. And now we're building the shoulder areas. Anatomy knowledge is useful here as far as like, the clavicle and tricep relationships, as well as the, oh wait, I wasn't going to mention anatomy, sorry. So it's important to make sure I get the planar relationships between the neck and the shoulder to display. As you can see on the model on the left, the back of the neck seems to come up a little bit more than the planes on the front. So these are things to keep in mind, because these little subtle differences will just make it easier. But it's nothing to worry about, because, this whole thing doesn't matter what the geometry is, because not only does it get resculpted, it also gets retopoed. So all we're doing here is just building the form. If we can build the base shape and get it to have an even enough distribution of quads that we can go in and sculpt it, then we can just take this thing as far as we want to and then just retopo and call it a day. So throughout the process of doing this, I realized there were a couple of changes that need to be done, like the bodyguard shoulders may need to come in a bit um, in order to give them the form that the shape that I'm going for here. The chest shape's off, got to adjust that. Looking at the picture, let's drop a big ass medallion on them. There we go. And that's it. The geometry's not pretty, but we'll just deal with it as we go along. Take a quick break, back to work. So in ZBrush, whenever I'm sculpting, if you watched any of my videos on ZBrush practice, I always just drop an ear in because I've modeled enough ears in Blender that I just try to avoid it. So in ZBrush, you have the feature of being able to Dynamesh and drop in objects and then remesh it to automatically join the rest of the mesh. So pretty much you can build a model as you go. I start with a sphere, start turning it into a face, add a body, add legs, add hands, add clothes, and just go from there. So my obsession is definitely streamlining the character development process. So a couple of the techniques that I've learned from it I'm trying to do here, like for example, just implanting an ear. So I drop in the ear, and the ear's geometry was a bit dense when I first brought it in, so I hit decimate on it with unsubdivide to remove a level of subdivision. As you can see with all the tries, it wasn't actually smooth, but by using the same amount of verts on the end and making the same amount of verts in the hole, I'm able to insert this object on it, thus removing a bit of time as far as modeling goes. I mean, I could make y'all ear if y'all wanted, but let's assume that you don't. And it welds on nicely. And I mean, I was thinking of doing the same thing with the mouth, but I wanted to keep most of this model original and built within the same video, and not just, just bring in a bunch of preset parts and build it up. However, they're not presets, they are, of course, built by me. So now to make the helmet. So with the helmet, I'll just drop in a sphere, divide it, cut it in half, shrink wrap it onto the head, apply it, project it to fit on the surface better, and then from there, extrude it out, hide the top faces, or I don't do it yet. Now I'm going to extrude out the logo headgear. And all this is rough. I end up going back over it and over it. But the main goal here is to just establish the shape of the character so that I can know what to go on. Because looking at a blank canvas is disheartening. And looking at a cube is even more disheartening because you haven't gotten anywhere yet. So Blender gets closer and closer to being able to just grab a cube and turn it into whatever you want. Like I took a cube and turned it into a sci-fi car the other day using the dynamic sculpt feature. So they're definitely pretty powerful. And I've always been a skeptic of Blender sculpting abilities until recent times. So we'll add a solidify to the collar, flip the normals. Now the solidify looks right. So I add an armature. This is a little different. My goal was to just be able to pose this model all throughout the design process, so I'd be able to have beautiful renders to make his thumbnails and not just have a T-posed mesh until the very end. So I've been experimenting with the idea of possibly rigging and building at the same time and just keeping it all in working in tandem all throughout the development process. So we have the rig and, we already got the head moving. The topology is horrible, but T-posing is more horrible than the geometry. So and I also go in, add a sphere, subdivide it, make it the shape of the head, replace the shape of the bone, copy, paste in the custom shapes. And now all I have to do is just make these fit, and now I have a bone for the head. And tra-la-la. So the next thing is to make something for the chest. The chest wasn't as easy. In fact, it was kind of a pain. just gonna have to go back and redo some of these bone shapes. But like I said, it's a mesh and a rig that's in development at the same time. So, we're able to fine tune this thing all throughout the process. As we add parts, we can just add a bone to just go ahead and control that. And maybe at the very end, when we're done, adding the final texture, we can already deal with the rigged model. Or at least that's just what my thought process was throughout the process of doing all this. Because, you get in Blender, you make stuff, kind of takes a long time. Or it can take a long time. My goal is to make it not take very long at all. So you look at the last week of uploads from the time that I've put this, and you see I've been quite busy, but these things aren't actually taking very long. My goal is to build an entire world of objects and just begin working towards a feature full-length film or something, or at least some completed videos. And of course, viewers, if you have any ideas or requests for a particular tutorial, just let me know. I received one request about how to make cloth-like hair that blows in the wind, that uses planes as a expansion on my polygon hair video. So that's something that I'll probably work on over next couple, as well as maybe do a time lapse on the controller or something. Like I've been wanting to make a Dreamcast controller in Blender. Alright, just put a little sub D on and make it look good. Remove the sub D because, this thing's in development. Another thing that I never really put a lot of contemplation into until recently is that whenever you use the mirror modifier on your model, it creates a vertex group. I mean, whenever you're modeling and rigging, you're creating vertex groups because that's how you parent your verts to the bones and create those relationships. But in addition to that, you also create a mirror of that group on the other side of the axis. So I never really put a lot of contemplation into it until recently, that the rigging process is definitely cut in half because you can't just paint on one side. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because I did make the mistake after adding arms of putting a comma in place of a period on one of the bone names, and it just would not modify the other arm with the mirror. But it was still working on the rest of the body. But those are the kind of logic issues I deal with. So right here, I just added in a plane. What I did was I just made an array and added wrinkles to the array, then merged it and fit them all together so the cloth was automatically wrinkled. So here I'm just playing with the cloth simulator to try to get the appearance of waving fabric and possibly just create a swishing cape to have behind him, because the model is of course boring in a T-pose, but if we add a cape, suddenly he means business. Suddenly someone's life is getting saved. So I turn on self-collision, and I'm wondering what the hell I'm looking at right here. Looks horrible. It looks horrible there too. Turn off that self-collision. I might try it one more time. And in just a moment, I think I get it working. And here we go. After changing some distances, I managed to get the cloth to flow while not penetrating itself so bad. However, it is penetrating. So I add a solidify and run a smooth operation. A common thing you see me do all the time is smooth with W and smooth, and then press Shift R to repeat it to just keep smoothing it. And all smoothing does is just, of course, smooth it. But I think the algorithm it uses is just good for untangling things and getting them to somewhat sort. So I use it as a way of gradually getting things to fit. So these are things that you got to experiment with, because these simple functions, I find that there's a psychology behind it that you have to adopt in your mind to really utilize it into your workflow to get more power and speed up your development process. Because I mean, all of our goals here are to what? Make films, make games, get rich. or at least make money, right? Everybody's goal here is to make money. But, that's for another tutorial on how to make money using Blender. So now I'm making extraction off of the shoulder. Of course, use my handy knife tool to cut it to look like some shoulder pads, staying true to the concept, and add a solidify and flip the normals and flip the thickness. And now we have shoulder pads and our model. So I'm looking at a model that's about as good as the quality of drawing I did to begin with. So, I'm not the best artist, but I was pretty proud at being able to draw a character and then come in and model them this quickly. And so we render it out. So the background, so the lighting here is actually a strange setup. Um, it's set up to not show any of the HDRI map that's actually lighting it by using a mix shader and a is camera ray. And then the HDRI that's lighting it is actually one I downloaded off a Blender cookie that was of like an outdoor green field. So it actually gives me a pretty good starting light scene, but I have it as part of my default scenes now. And so now that ends part 1 of Bmesh. Happy blendering.